And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could be with us for what's going to be another engaging conversation today with Dr. Teresa A. Smith, or Dr. TAS, from her book, Transformation. We are wrapping up her 10 messages that she has in her book. If you guys do not have your copy, we're going to remind you how you can get your own copy of it, as well as how you can stay connected with her. Nahid's joining us from the West Coast. Nahid, glad to see you there. Going to go ahead and bring in Dr. TAS there. If you guys are not following Dr. TAS, I'm going to remind you guys how you can do that, as well as, of course, to stay connected for all the great things that she has going on online and soon offline as well. We have been having some great conversations around her book, and I know today's not going to be any different. Dr. TAS, how we doing?
I'm great, Cyrus. How are you?
All right, you're looking great as always. Love that background. It looks good with you. I meant to tell you that last week.
Thank you.
So, Dr. TAS, we're going to get into message 7 today. I am on the right one, right?
Yes.
You did. How you doing? Good to see you for joining us overseas. Good to see you. Appreciate all of you for being on with us. Give you guys a quick wave. And also just a little bit of housekeeping here. We'll let you guys know, if you all are not following Dr. TAS, they have made it very easy for you to be able to do it here on Instagram. Thanks to Meta. All you have to do is click right here. There's a drop-down arrow. You can click that drop-down arrow, follow Dr. TAS. If you're not following me, you can follow me as well. Also, anyone else who's watching our live here, you all can be able to follow them live without even leaving the show, which is great. It's a great feature there. Also, if you guys have a question for Dr. TAS, we would love to have that featured on the show as well. There's a bubble down below by Dr. TAS with a question mark in it. If you click on that, you can be able to write your question in. We'll be glad to be able to bring that on. So for those who are new here, TAS, let's go ahead and catch them up a little bit. We've been going through the messages of your book, Transformation. There are 10 messages that are in the book. We've now covered 6 of them already in our broadcast here on IG and YouTube. And we're going into message 7 today. And this one, I have to say, Dr. TAS, I feel about this one similar to how I felt about last week. Let me tell you what I mean. I feel like this one is almost speaking to 2 different audiences, right? It starts off, and I should let our audience know, for those who are just coming in, the message we're covering today is running on empty. It's message 7 from Dr. TAS' book. Again, there's 10 messages in the book. We've been covering now the last 6. So now we're up to number 7, running on empty. So TAS, this is what I mean by this. And then I'm curious as to your thoughts. The main part of the message seems to be how we are being refreshed. Then it seems like as we get into the second part of this message, it's about who are we kind of being allowing to pour into us and who we're kind of pouring into as well. Talk to us about this message and how it came about.
Well, Cyrus, I was prepping for this, and then I'm like, okay, I know Cyrus is going to ask me some really difficult questions, and I'm like, I don't know which way he's going to go, but he's going to go some way, and I just got to be prepared. But, when I was looking at it, like you, it's like I was thinking about duality, because at first it was like I'm asking a question, or I'm posing a question that a person may internally be having.
Right.
Then I'm given a response that you could look at as an encourager, affirmation. But then when I looked over at the gleam, and I looked at the questions, it was like, okay, you talked about the individual themselves, but then their support. And I thought, well, now why did you do that? But then I looked back and I said, building relationships on truth, not deception. And, the most important relationship we have is the relationship we have with ourselves first.
Yeah.
And so if you start from there, in my mind, it makes sense, running on empty and then moving into the relationships, because we do need external relationships to help keep us full also. And so I think that's how I sort of drove the vehicle and landed where I did.
Got you. Hello to you, Kimberly. Good to see you. Again, welcome all of you to this episode of Cyrus Webb Presents. We're here with Dr. TAS, Dr. Teresa A. Smith. Dr. Teresa Smith here on Instagram, if you guys are not following her there. We're in message number 7, which is a powerful one in her book, Transformation. It's running on empty. I want to mention 2 of the questions that you asked. And again, I want to say, and this is me as a reader saying this, TAS, and then feel free to add your 2 cents because you wrote it. I feel like it starts off from a very spiritual standpoint, because I think, as the first question says, are you running on empty? And your response is God replenishes your fuel source. Whether you use regular, middle grade, or premium, he always provides what you need. And then the second thing is, are you feeling like Humpty Dumpty? And your response is, he'll put you back together again better than you were before. And of course, that is all about God and what God is able to do for us. So I want to talk about those two, because I think they're really interesting, because I think you may have some people, TAS, who feel as though they just have nothing left to give, right? Or they don't have anything themselves. But there are also people, I feel like, that feel so broken, who feel like they have nothing they can offer. So what would you say to people out there who are thinking about transformation, but maybe holding on to something, some trauma, maybe not that was done to them, but what I thought about was something they may have done that they feel guilt over, feel broken about? What would you say to them about how this message can speak to them to help them feel more complete on their journey to transformation?
The first thing I would say, Cyrus, is you've got to forgive yourself. We all have done things that we're not really pleased about, and we don't want it to happen again. But until I can forgive myself, then I'm not free to move forward, because that means I'm constantly dragging that with me. And so, but in forgiving myself, I got to be honest with myself that what I did was wrong, the implications of it, the long-lasting effects of it. And to me, that's that first step to actually being able to put yourself back together. Because even though God is putting us back together, we are really putting ourselves back together through the lessons that we learn. And to me, that is that very first step.
Yeah, such a great point. And to that point about running on empty, I can think of so many different layers to this, TAS. Hello to you, Paper Montana, good to see you. Hello to you, Angela. Good to see you as well. There are a couple things I think about, and we talked a little bit about this last week, but I think it's interesting with this topic in dealing with transformation, in my eyes as a reader. And that is for people who feel like I'm giving all I can and I'm not getting anywhere. And they feel like, I'm trying to change. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to do this, trying to do that, but they're not seeing the progress. Could it be that they're running on the wrong source, or trying to tap into the wrong source to get to where they want to go, TAS?
Well, Sas, I'm gonna jump right on there and say yes, because lots of times we're on the wrong path, and it's the right path. I may have said this last week. It's the right path, but it's the wrong time. Even for myself, I just did something. I'll tell you about it offline. Mm-hmm. It's something that someone introduced me to some time ago. I couldn't do it. I can do it now. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that I was on the wrong path. I was too early in my journey. And sometimes, it just takes time. But we as human beings, because we don't see immediate gratification, then we say, okay, this can't work for me. This is not the right path. And so we back up, and then we go down another path. And before you know it, sometimes you've tried 5 or 6 things, and then you wind up coming back to the original thing, and then you see progress. But for me, it's just that you were too early. Yeah. And sometimes we just too early, and we don't understand what that really means, because it's more than just saying you're too early. It means everything that you're trying to force to happen, it's not going to happen because you're too early.
Yeah. And it's interesting here you say that, TAS. What I thought about too is we've been going through this book, is that it may be that we're trying to skip steps. Mm-hmm. And we are, as human beings, I feel like, my mom says I have a great deal of patience. She says I'm an old person. I have a lot of patience, but a lot of times we want things right then, right? We don't want to. We get a book like this and we say, okay, transformation. We see there's 10 messages. We go right to number 10. Yeah. And we think, okay, if I read this one, surely I'm going to get everything I need to get, to get to where I want to go. So I think this is an interesting thing to think about as our audience is thinking about running on empty, is the fuel, because to go with your analogy that you use in the book, sometimes you're using the wrong grade of gas anyway. Yes. And that causes problems, along the way. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, filling up what you need to be filling up on, that in itself can cause you issues. and could hinder you on your journey to transform. But TAS, as I mentioned, as we both talked about, there is a dual thing going on here, because I also think, especially like people like you and I, anyone who's on this broadcast, you are a person of influence, whether it's in your household, in your community, online, offline. All of us are people of influence because people listen to us. They may follow us in some, we may be a supervisor on a job or something. And there's a responsibility that comes with that. And I think there's also a bigger implication here, TAS, in looking at this next message. And that is this: as you look at the Reflect and Connect, you ask us to think about others. And I love the second point: which members of your support network are dependable? And I think that is an interesting thing for us to think about, because as we're talking about our personal lives, our professional lives, our family members, as we are trying to change, we may have people around us that we look to as part of our support system, those to, to rally us, to push us. How important is that for us to make sure we're choosing people who are dependable, TAS, and who will hold us accountable while they encourage us?
Oh, Cyrus, I think that's it's really significant, and being able to determine who those individuals are. I was listening to some training earlier today, and everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but most people have some objective, and that's okay. But you got to make sure that their objective doesn't supersede your needs, because what happens is, if we're looking for someone that's part of your support network, you determine dependability by what they do when you're at your lowest point, the nadir. I learned that there long years ago when I was at Carolina as an undergraduate. It just fascinated me, the nadir. Yeah. When you're at your lowest point, because the people who are supporting you at your lowest point, they're dependable. Because when you're at that point, you really don't have anything to give them but your time, maybe your listening ear. So you got to be able to decipher who your support network is, because remember, we're talking duality. So you're swinging to the left, you're swinging to the right. You need that individual that can help keep you centered, help balance you on a scale. So regardless whether it's your personal, your family, or professional career life, rather, you have to have that person or those individuals who will be real with you. Because this type of work, you don't need yes people. You need yes people for something else. But when you're really trying to transform, you need people who are going to really tell you the truth in the proper way, and then support you as you try to work through those truths.
Such a great point. For those who are just tuning in, you are watching Cyrus Webb Presents here on IG Live and YouTube. We're joined by Dr. Teresa A. Smith, or Dr. TAS as we call her. If you guys are following us on Instagram, you can find her at Dr. Teresa Smith. If you'll look at that drop-down arrow right here that's on IG, you'll notice right beneath my name, when you click on that drop-down arrow, you'll see Dr. TAS there. You can go ahead and follow her without even leaving our broadcast today. And we also will let you guys know how to stay connected with her, because she's taking the message of her book into another community. We'll tell you guys about that later on in the month. But today we're discussing message number 7 from Dr. TAS's book, Transformation. It's available on Amazon in print as well as a Kindle edition. And we've been building up. It begins with the idea that change is challenging. And we've been going through different components of this, what it takes to transform. Today in message 7, we're talking about running on empty. So, TAS, I want to ask you this question, because I don't know the answer, so I'm asking for everybody. How did you decide to, as we're talking about transformation, how did you decide on what you wanted to call this message, Running on Empty?
Cyrus, you think I'm going to say something really significant, really groundbreaking. Probably when I was writing this, I was running on empty. And I probably started writing it first, because I remember when I wrote this is really scaled down, because I kept refining it, and it didn't start out this way, but then it wound up being a question and then an answer. Yeah. And running on empty just kind of bubbled up, because I'll tell you, the Humpty Dumpty, I used to love to read this nursery rhyme. Mm-hmm. And all the king's men, they couldn't put him back together again. And right. So you think about it, when you're empty, how do you come back together and become a cohesive, fully functioning individual? So right. Is it regular, middle, premium gas? I'm on empty. How do I move forward? And I think, the combination of that nursery rhyme and then just being on empty, and you could call empty burnout. That's another term that you could use. But I think all of that just kind of came together, and I thought, okay, rain on empty. Now what do you do?
Yeah. Hello to you, Roy. Hello to you, Ashley. Good to see you guys as well. So I want to ask you, talking about another area of the book in the Reflect and Connect here. This is another important question here that you wrote, TAS. Are your relationships mutually beneficial, or are they one-sided? What makes them that way? And again, I think this is an interesting thing, again, personally and professionally, right? Because when we're thinking about, again, our jobs, we think about our homes, our friendships, there are some people, and I think you were right to say it the way you're going to say. I think everyone does have an agenda. I don't necessarily think that's bad. I think it's good for people to know where they're coming from, what they want, and that, to me, having an agenda, it just means that they have a goal or they have something that they are, that they're working toward. It could be a good thing. Some people have a bad agenda, maybe. But why is it important for us to question or to analyze for ourselves if the people around us are there for us, or are they only there for themselves?
Birds of a feather flock together. So therefore, I think my grandmother used to say, if you lay down with dogs, you'll get up with fleas. These are things that, I didn't know my maternal grandmother, but this is what I've been taught. So it's very important to understand what that person's agenda, that person's goal is. Because if it's not something that lines up with your agenda or your goal, well, then you may have set yourself up for failure because you now linked yourself with someone who their goal and who they are at their core may be counter active to who you are. So
Right.
that's the reason it's important, because we don't want to lay down and get up with fleas.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so true. And I think too, Taj, as our audience is thinking about this for themselves, I think you have to be honest and ask yourself, are you one-sided?
Mm-hmm.
Are you only with someone for what you can get from them? Or are you looking to be a complement? And again, we're talking personally and
Yep.
professionally. And I think this is why it's so important that you begin this particular message with the self-reflection. Because a lot of times it's very easy for us to say what other people are doing or what they haven't done. It's a lot more difficult for sometimes for us to own up to what we have done and what we have not done. And sometimes we're not the best. I've said to people, hey, I haven't always been the best friend. That's just the
Mm-hmm.
truth. It
Yep.
doesn't mean that was the intent, but my
Mm-hmm.
actions show differently than what I even thought. And sometimes that's a hard thing to admit, but it's the truth,
Mm-hmm.
And so how important is it as we're talking about this message where people are thinking about replenishing themselves and getting to a place where they can feel whole, Taz, that they also think about the relationship and what can help them to stay whole?
I think it's very important, Sarah. What you're talking about is for me, I'm hearing being vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
think those individuals who we're championing and who are championing us, we should be able to be vulnerable with them. I had a friend whose birthday was this week, and I still haven't checked. We've been texting. I still don't know if she got the video. But when I just felt this, like you said, I haven't always been the best friend, but I love her dearly. And so I recorded a video. I don't know if it went, but when I started recording the video, I started out singing happy birthday to her. Then I teared up. And I guess just the reality of just how important she is in my life
Mm.
and how hurt I would be if something happened to her. So for me, even though, time passes, um, and I can honestly say that we're on the same we have the same sort of agendas in life.
Mm.
And our agendas are being a benefit to mankind. She does it one way, I do it another way. But our goals align. And I think that's the reason why we're able to champion each other the way that we do. And I think that is so important for everyone to have those individuals who can do that for you and that you in turn do it for them also. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Love that. I skipped ahead, Todd, but I wanted to wrap up today with the Gleam recap for this one because I thought it was an interesting way for us to wrap up. Build relationships on truth, not deception. And let's begin as far as an assignment for our audience, ties, with that being true with our relationship with ourselves. what would you say to our audience about the importance of evaluating their relationship with the person in the mirror and to see where they stand with themselves?
Cyrus, I'm constantly evaluating myself. Now, some people who really know me, they know that because I'm talking to them about what I'm discovering about myself.
Yeah.
But I think for most people, they think, oh, she doesn't look at herself. She doesn't see her good points. She doesn't see her negative points. I see them all. But at the same time, I can't let anything that I may think is negative or that someone else think is negative stop me from evolving, because we all have negative parts to our personality, things that we need to work on. And just like you said, you pick up the book, you start at message 10 and you think everything's going to be good enough. You got to start at message 1 and you got to work through it. And then you'll get to message 6 and you think you got it. And then you realize you got to start over because something will trigger and you'll be back at that negative space. So to me, not buying into, I call it your representative, that facade that you create for the world, and being honest with who you are. That is paramount when it comes to transforming. It's paramount for me as the writer of the book, and also for those who are wanting to transform.
Yeah. Our friend Mary Ellen calls it the ego, TAS. She's all about talking about the ego self, how it's easy for us to get to a place where we try to, justify ourselves, try to feel like we have to defend ourselves, instead of really just taking a look at ourselves and saying, you know what, there's something in this I can benefit from, and for myself, I say I'm a work in progress all the time. Half the day I may get it right, the other half I may not.
Yep.
But I just look forward to the next day and hopefully I get another opportunity. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the way I think we all have to be, right? Is remember that we're not always going to get this right, which is why it's a transformation. And also, for those who are new here, to keep in mind, it's not a one and done either. It is something that will continually happen. But I love, TAS, what we've done in this is we've kind of gone throughout. We now have 3 more segments to discuss here in the next couple of weeks. I love the fact that it really shows that it is a process. Once you identify in message 1 that change is challenging, you then are able to look at the different components of that change. And I want to bring up something that we're going to let them know how to stay connected with you. Does it necessarily mean, TAS, that everyone will deal with the same message in the same way?
Oh, no, Cyrus. Every time I pick this little book up, I deal with something totally different. I can pick it up in an hour and I can go back and look at this message and I'll see something totally different. And it doesn't mean that what I saw in prepping was wrong. It doesn't mean that what I'll see in an hour is wrong. It's all part of that transformation process because we're constantly evolving. Every time there is, every effect, there's an opposite effect. I'm saying it all wrong.
Yeah,
but you guys get my point. Every time something happens, you gain knowledge.
Right.
Whether you think about it or not. So therefore, when you go back to your job, you pick up a book, you're going to look at it with different eyes. That's just the way it is because we're constantly learning and constantly evolving. So what I always say is you welcome that. I don't look at it as contradictory because if you are the same all the time, hear what I'm saying? If you're the same person all the time, either you're not in touch with who you are, you're not in touch with what's going on around you, or something else is going on. Because none of us are always the same. We don't always get it right, as Cyrus was saying. Yeah. So don't beat yourself up that you're up and down. That's just a part of life.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think, too, that's a great thing. And that's also part of growth. It's like even in life, well, unless you're me and you've been 5'7" for the past 35 years. But most of us are changing somewhere along the line. But I think that's a great point, TAS, for us to keep in mind that there's nothing wrong with change. A lot of times people say I'm the same all the time. And I understand what they mean by the principle who they are is the same. But all of us are a work in progress. All of us are growing, we're changing, and hopefully learning, not only about ourselves, but also our dealings with others. Again, everyone, we've been discussing message number 7 from Dr. TAS's book. Today we were talking about running on empty, what you're being filled with, but also who you're being surrounded by. Because again, and TAS, again, I just saw about another connection as we're wrapping up here. that if we are not being filled up by the right source, if the people around us are not right, that's another thing that's going to affect our transformation. It really just came to me as we were wrapping up here. But I think that's the other side of this too, is, you know, are you allowing yourself, and that can go to the news, what kind of news you're filling yourself up with,
Yep.
you know, what you have on your news feed, what you have on your feed on social media. You know, is it junk, or is it something that's actually going to benefit you? Those are all, and that really just came to me in the last 2 minutes of this conversation, John. But that just shows, again, we were covering it from one aspect, but I just thought about, if we're not allowing the source of life to fill us, we're allowing something to fill us.
Yes.
And we have to ask ourselves, is that a good thing or a not good thing? You know, because that could also be what stunts our transformation there. So again, message number 7 from Dr. TAS's book, Running on Empty. You can get the book, as I mentioned, on Amazon in print, as well as the Kindle edition. And TAS, how can they stay connected with you?
The best way to stay in contact with me is to follow me here on Instagram. I'm Dr. Teresa Smith here. Please reach out to me. I love answering questions. And as Cyrus said, we've got something coming. We'll talk about it a little later in the month, another community where we can stay in contact.
Exactly. And I want to let people know, as another plug for Dr. TAS, not only does she have a book, she has an upcoming cooking show as well that also has some other components to it. She's been giving you guys a teaser here on Instagram. TAS, what has that been like for you? I've been enjoying watching you in the kitchen. What has that been like for you to show people another side of you?
Oh, Cyrus, it is just wonderful. You know, I had soup and grilled cheese, or whatever I want to call it today. I am loving it. Mistakes and all, I'm loving it, because, you know, it's one thing to talk about, you know, transforming. It's another thing to show it and show how you have to be resilient in everything that happens. So I am so excited. I cannot wait to premiere the show. So please stay tuned. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. The teasers are going to keep coming. And of course, the food's going to be wonderful, because I'm a great cook.
There you go. There you go. Again, everyone, Dr. Teresa Smith has been with us here on this episode of Cyrus Webb Presents, discussing message 7 from her book, Transformation. Next week, we'll be back with message number 8. And the last Sunday of January, we'll be discussing the last 2. So we'll have an hour special for you guys. We kicked off January with an hour special. We're ending January with an hour special, talking about the last 2 messages. But make sure you guys catch us next Sunday right here for the next message, which is message number 8 from her book, Transformation. TAS, always a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Cyrus.
You're welcome. And we thank you all for watching this episode of Cyrus Webb Presents. You all make it a great one. We'll see you soon.